Thank you, Julie. I can see attendees coming in now, so I'll just give it a few more moments to let people join, just so that we've got lots of people getting involved. Thank you all so much for being here today. Hopefully you've brought some lunch or a cup of tea or coffee, and this should be a really great session and hopefully very interesting and informative with a little bit of audience participation as well. So do be thinking of questions that you can ask to our panelists who we'll hear more from later. But for now, I think we will kick off. So welcome all to our Oxfordshire GreenTech and ethics event on a sustainable transport system for Oxfordshire and how EV charging in particular can play a part in getting our county to net zero carbon by 2050 or perhaps sooner. I'm Hannah Scott, and I'm the Communications and Members Manager at Oxfordshire GreenTech, the county's business network for a low carbon future. And I'm joined today by a brilliant panel of people across local government, business and voluntary sectors who will be talking on the important subject of transport later. We're running this event in partnership with ethics, who help everyday people make ethical investments that fund extraordinary organisations. So it's great to be working with them. But first, I'm just going to say a little more about Oxfordshire GreenTech. Having launched in 2019 as part of a large European funded project to scale up the low carbon economy in Oxfordshire, we are now a member network of close to 100 member organisations from local authorities, including Oxfordshire County Council, Southern Vale and Cherwell District Councils, to innovative green businesses like Zeta, who Phil is representing today, to professional service providers, charities, and more. Our mission is to work across silos to bring as many people together as possible to collaborate on tackling the climate crisis and give a platform to those organisations pursuing solutions that will help Oxfordshire and our world. We do this through putting on knowledge transfer events, such as this one, networking sessions, a monthly newsletter and quarterly e-shots with funding opportunities, business and sustainability support, facilitated introductions to whoever you want to meet to help your organization thrive, innovation competitions, and more. And we work with partners like our sister network, Cambridge CleanTech, Oxlep, Oxfordshire County Council, and more to make sure we have as much positive impact as possible. If you were interested in joining our community, please do get in touch with me afterwards and I can share a link in the chat. But for now, moving back to the topic at hand, sustainable transport for Oxfordshire and the role of EV charging. Transport for the UK is one of our most polluting sectors, taking up 27% of the UK's total emissions in 2019, with cars and taxis accounting for 16%. Improved fuel efficiency of cars has generally seen emissions from cars decrease since the mid-2000s, but this is still inefficient to meet the needs of a future zero carbon world. As part of a future zero carbon transport system, electric vehicles, or EVs, are expected to play a role. Almost every major car maker has electric vehicles available to buy or plan for the next few years. Car giant Nissan said yesterday morning it plans to spend more than £13 billion on developing electric vehicles. The car manufacturer, which has a major plant in Sunderland, revealed it will develop 23 new electric models by 2030. And in a survey by the Office for National Statistics, more than half of motorists aged 16 to 49 years say they are likely to switch to all electric vehicles within the next decade. In our very own county, work has started on the Energy Super Hub project, the UK's largest public electric vehicle charging hub in Oxford, and the Park and Charge project, which we'll hear more about later, is a project that will install EV charging hubs in 20 car parks throughout Oxfordshire, giving residents with no off-street parking the ability to park for free overnight and charge their electric vehicles with competitive prices. And excitingly, an autonomous electric passenger shuttle service hit the roads for the first time today at Harwell Science and Innovation Campus, enabling a future that is not only autonomous, depending on what you kind of want your future to be, but also green. Of course, EVs are just one piece of the puzzle, with active travel like cycling and walking and public transport also being necessary for a sustainable transition. But one thing is certain. The more people we can get out of fossil-fueled vehicles, the better. I'm now going to introduce our panel, who we have here with us today to discuss sustainable transport barriers and solutions, as well as diving into the specifics around EV projects in our county and what can be done to accelerate change. So first of all, I'll introduce Josh Brewer from FX, who is the Senior Business Development Manager at that organization, working with highly impactful organizations to support them to raise people-powered finance so they can develop and grow their impact. During this time, he has worked with a number of sustainable transport organizations on sustainable finance raises. Josh has worked in responsible and impact investing for 15 years, and before that, he worked in the economic justice team at Save the Children UK. He has also worked for a bank and made sausages. Moving on then to Paul Gambrell. Paul is the ZEV and Energy Integration Team Leader in the Innovation Hub at Oxfordshire County Council. The ZEV team is involved in several projects looking at several aspects involved in vehicle electrification, including the challenge of providing access to chargers for residents without off-road parking, such as the Park and Charge project, VPACH, and the GULE project, I think. Sorry if I botched that. Paul will come on to that later. There you go, Oxgully, thank you. The team also led the development of a strategy for EV charging for Oxfordshire and has been involved in projects on vehicle to grid and electrified road systems. So we're looking forward to hearing from Paul later. Moving on to Chris. Chris Church is Campaigns Officer for Oxford Friends of the Earth in a voluntary capacity and manages the Oxford Zero Carbon Homes Initiative. He is co-director of Community Environment Associates and has worked in the environmental sector for over 25 years as a consultant, which included 3 years managing Don't Choke Britain, a passenger transport executive and local council's campaign promoting modal shift and active transport. Thank you for being here today, Chris. And then over to Phil Shadbolt. Phil started the Zeta Group in 1989 after working as a researcher at Oxford Brookes University. Phil is a highly competent entrepreneur and innovator who likes to come up with innovative solutions for his customers. Under Phil's stewardship, Zeta has received a number of prestigious awards recognizing its success in innovation, including 5 DTI Smart Awards. The Zeta Group designs and manufactures innovative products in automotive, solar, and LED lighting. In 2019, Zeta won a highly prestigious award from Innovate UK to develop and pilot the new EV charger under the Park and Charge Oxfordshire scheme. In addition to his work at Zeta, Phil is an experienced board director, having been on 4 boards: Oxlep, Bista Vision, Bista Technology Studio, Activate Learning Education Trust, and he was recently a governor at Oxford Brookes University. Great to have you here, Phil. And finally, moving on to Vikki Robbins. Vikki works in Oxford City's award-winning sustainability city team, which is delivering the Oxford Go Ultra Low program for on-street EV charging points infrastructure, or EVCP, and taxi rapid charging. This is an Oxford Zero sorry, there's so many acronyms here. I'm struggling, but we're fine. An Oxford ZEV funded rollout testing a range of EVCP in Oxford, including lamppost charging and innovative new cable gullies, resulting in the widely cited Go Ultra Low Oxford monitoring and evaluation study. Her background in technology has enabled her to drive the consolidation of the current EVCP estate to readiness for business as usual and work with public and private sector partners to create an up-to-date set of solutions for a range of charging types, as well as enabling the development of a procurement solution fit for the future, Oxford's dynamic purchasing system for EV solutions. Her passion to simplify the EVCP deployment process ensures it complements the sustainable transport hierarchy and make access to charging equitable. So thank you all for being here today. I'm going to pose some questions to you so that people can hear other voices apart from my own and let the discussion flow. And then a little later, I'll welcome questions from the audience. So for those listening in today, do be thinking about what it is you would like to ask our panelists here today. And please use the chat box function in order to submit questions throughout. And I can see that people have already been doing that, which is great. So thank you for that. So, to kick off, a question for all panelists. Has anything inspired you in the world of sustainable transport recently, whether locally or further afield? Do feel free just to jump in whatever order you'd like. Josh, you've unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's inspiring is just this sudden shift in emphasis and how things are suddenly moving forward. I think it's very interesting. A couple of years ago at Ethics, we talked about sustainable transport as being something that we thought would be a really good fit with our investors, that they'd want to invest in it. And so we went out into the marketplace, and we couldn't find any businesses for people to invest into, actually. But now that's changed, and so we've got organisations like Easy Charge, who are working on the Park and Charge programme, who now, they have a requirement to raise finance. They can take that out to our investors, and we're seeing quite a lot of other sustainable transport organisations and businesses coming forward. And I think that, to me, is it shows that actually things are taking place, things are happening now, when it just wasn't before.
Brilliant. Thanks for that answer, Josh. Lots to be inspired about. Anyone else?
So it's Vikki here. I think the thing for me that I've really noticed recently is that now there's a lot more momentum around the whole shift towards low carbon solutions or zero carbon solutions. I feel that the partnership working is a lot more vibrant. I think the conversations are a lot more immediate, moving to actions much more quickly. And especially for our city, that's absolutely key. We've got the zero emissions zone coming very soon. And our collaboration with people like the City Council and our suppliers and our arm's length organisation, Oxford Direct Services, really shows that you can start to have a joined up solution to try and meet some of these demands.
Absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Vikki. Partnerships are super important. Chris, please go.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to say I've been really inspired. I think transport is still going too slowly, but I think there has been a shift from, why are we going to do anything, to what and how do we do? And I think we are really now looking at, some of the issues that are being raised, like rural electric transport. We're now starting to really dig in and see, okay, what are the technical challenges and the political will challenges? So I think we have moved on this, but we've got a very long way to go.
Absolutely. The first way of tackling a problem is to identify what needs to be done, which is very, very true. And more needs to be done, as you said. Paul or Phil, any comments?
The point I would take is basically building on one Josh made, is the way that the language and the conversation has changed so rapidly. I've been working in the EV field for more years than I care to remember now, but it has changed markedly from the days where people would say, I don't want to talk to you because all you're going to go and bang on about is an electric vehicle, to they actually want to engage now and understand what's required and how we need to move things forward. And that's right across a number of stakeholders working in this field. And the other point that Vikki made is very important. We can only deliver what's needed in partnership right across the stakeholders, because mobility involving electric power is dependent upon so many things in a way that petrochemical fueled vehicles are not.
Real, thank you, Paul. And finally, Phil.
Yeah, I think the thing that's astounding me is the pace of change. When we did our business model for Easy Charge, and we were looking at users taking about 2,000 kilowatt hours a month from a car park typically, and that's what we modelled in for our bond offer, and that's what we shared in the documentation. And I just looked before I came online. Our statistics for this month are already at 3,000 kilowatt hours, so it's 50% increase on what we'd planned to do by the end of next year. So the pace that we're moving it's great, but it's just staggering, actually, the pace that we're moving in already.
That's brilliant, Phil. But brilliant to hear that the utilization rates are just so high and far higher than you predicted. So yeah, more of that, please. Brilliant. Well, thanks all for your answers. Now we're going to sort of dig a little bit into the other side of the coin. What do you think the biggest challenges currently to Oxfordshire getting to a net zero carbon transport system are?
If I can come in there, one of the biggest single challenges is the rural nature of Oxfordshire. We have one city, lots of market towns and lots of rural areas, and that is a challenge. It can also be an opportunity in that it can be simpler to roll out things in areas of less dense population. But we've got every challenge there is basically facing us right across the spectrum when you're talking about moving over to electrified transportation. But we're a innovative, versatile bunch here in Oxfordshire, and I mean, the partnership we have with Easy Charge on Park and Charge just shows, when you start getting the right people together, we can find the solutions to the problems.
Brilliant. Thank you, Paul. Anyone else have any comments on sort of the biggest challenges that we're facing for our sustainable transport system? Vikki?
Yeah, I think I can talk about it from this sort of the city perspective, and I think we've got a unique situation in the city. We've got a mixture of very, very different demographics. We've got heritage, we've got suburban, we've got transport challenges, we've got infrastructure challenges, and we've also got power challenge as well. And again, this sort of harks a little bit back to our collaboration piece, but for example, the electric super hub that we put into the city has also put a fibre ring into the grid. And then we are going to have a big battery store at one of our park and rides to try and mitigate one of the problems around inconsistency of power. And I think these sorts of big building blocks, they're difficult, they're complex, and they're hard to do. But without these sorts of foundations, it makes it really hard. You sort of end up building on a house of cards. And so having that in place, now we can start to really sort of try and drive up some of our installations across the city, and ensure that we have not just a solution for people, but a backup solution, and possibly a backup of a backup solution, and trying to think about that mix. We're just launching now our own strategy, and that's looking to address lots of those elements, including accessibility and equitability. And again, obviously, county is our highways partner, so ensuring that what we do dovetails with what they're doing, because obviously we're greater than the sum of the parts. I think those are some of our key challenges.
Brilliant. Yeah, the importance of making sure that you're not reinventing the wheel or even going against other sort of key stakeholders in the county is crucial. So thanks for raising that. Chris, I see you've unmuted.
Well, yeah, I think it's very hard to identify one challenge. If we reckon that we've got to do primarily three things: reduce, modify, and innovate, reduce emissions, but also reduce unnecessary car journeys, modify, modal shift and new technologies, and innovate all over the place. I think the real challenge, a lot of it, is institutional inertia, right down to local planning departments saying you still need, every new home needs extra car parking, and the idea that no one likes new developments that don't have adequate car parking. The kind of positive encouragement is still undermined by these kind of old style stuff. So I think we really need to look quite hard at making sure that the political will extends into political practice and planning practice, so that people recognize that innovation is going to be the order of the day for the next decade. And some of that is going to be inconvenient, and quite a lot of it's going to challenge established practice in a lot of places. But if we're going to get to zero carbon, we don't really have any option. If we accept the science, we have to accept the need for radical change. And I'm not sure if everyone is at the moment.
That's a very fair point. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. Phil?
Yeah, just talking about challenges, and I think it's coming up in the chat as well. One of the key challenges we'll be going forward is the capacity of the grid to power all of these. Everything's going electrical. It's not just our vehicles, our homes are going electric. Electricity is going to be in huge demand as we go forward. And I just wanted to touch on one of the exciting things that we've got going on in Oxfordshire. There's a project in Oxfordshire being run called Project Leo. This is Local Energy Oxford, and it's about matching and using our energy that we're producing in Oxfordshire and using it in Oxfordshire. And again, this is touching on Chris's point of innovation and creativity, and this is what we're so good at in Oxfordshire. And I'm delighted to say that we're working on this project with University of Oxford and SSEN, and it could lead to things like we'll be putting a hub shortly in Ensham, where there's also a PV farm going in. And the exciting thing for me would be the ability to actually get the electricity from the PV farm and deliver it through the chargers. Obviously, it goes through the network and it has to go through SSEN. But what a fantastic collaboration and an idea to say that we can optimize our electricity generation and use it locally. These kind of things I want to see more of. And I'm sure most people in this in this would want to see more of. And I think it's the right way to go, to innovate, to be creative, and to use the energy far more efficiently.
Thanks, Phil. You've somehow managed to take the question about challenges and turn it into a positive. So great work. Anyone else got any sort of final comments? Josh?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I would say this, but there's a challenge around financing, around investment, I think. So my understanding of talking to organisations like EasyCharge is it's not easy to raise like traditional types of finance from banks. They don't seem to really get it at the moment. They will eventually, but at the moment the need is now, and there's a shortage of capital available, and that's where ETHEX basically comes in and can bridge that gap, because we've got highly engaged investors who want to invest into impactful organisations. So we're doing a raise for EasyCharge at the moment, but I think I want to build on sort of Phil's point about the opportunity actually is that you can generate electricity in Oxfordshire. An Oxfordshire company can supply that electricity to electric vehicles, and then actually investors based in Oxfordshire who invest into that business can get a return from that, and that way that money stays within Oxfordshire, it stays local. The current model is it's all extracted by multinational businesses, fossil fuel companies. This model is a much more sustainable circular model. Yeah, so that's my point.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that's everyone spoken for that question. So let's keep moving on. And again, thank you so much for all the questions in the chat. There are lots of them there. So hopefully we'll get to tackle at least some of them in a little while. But for now, sort of Paul and Vikki, going more specifically to you, how are the county and city councils pushing forward a zero carbon transport agenda? Not necessarily just focusing on EV, but sort of looking at that wider picture as well.
Talking on the county level, we've recently published the Oxfordshire EV infrastructure strategy, which is focusing on how we meet the challenge for cars and vans in particular. We haven't looked at HGVs or bigger vehicles at the moment because the technologies are still being developed. Alongside that, other colleagues within county looking at the local transport and connectivity policy. That's going to be very much focused on the move over to zero emission vehicles. Basically, it's now running as a a core aim in everything we do within the county, whether it's our own transport or looking at the infrastructure and the types of things going on with within the whole of the Oxfordshire as a whole. It will take time for everything to work its way through, but it is very much key and core to everything we're now trying to do.
Great, thank you, Paul. Anything from you, Vikki?
Yeah, I just think one of the things I want to pick up on is the reliability of the charging estate. As you're aware, we were the Go Ultra Low project, which we did way back in 2017-18, and obviously technology has moved on massively since then, and we have consolidated our estate and updated it, but still performance is a challenge. And if you've only got a few chargers in the city and the charger nearest to you is not as reliable as you'd like it to be, this causes real headaches for people. And so what we're trying to do is, rather than sort of continue making the same types of deployment decisions, we're just taking a breath now and looking at our overall strategy about how better we can provide charging into Oxford, but not just thinking about charging for a resident in a road, but also thinking about those that can't charge because they haven't got off-street charging. So thinking about the Oxgully that I think you referred to earlier, that we're working on with an Innovate project we're working on with County and ODS, but also at car clubs. And I think we very much see car clubs as part of that transport hierarchy moving forward, and how to unleash them from just being a car club in one specific place, but to a more zoned approach. So we're in contact with our trial car club, Co-Wheels, to see what we can do in those spaces as well. And then alongside of that, within our team, we've also got the different biodiversity aspects of how to reduce carbon. You know, this is only one part of that overall sort of solution to try and get down to zero carbon. And those sorts of links now have been talked at our top table at the CMT within the council. You know, this is now seen as a priority rather than an adjunct to other services offered within the city. And I see that, and we need to continue to really push to ensure that things.
Oh, you've just muted yourself there.
I'll stop waving my arms around, but the point is these sorts of things are, you know, are seen as part and parcel, integral part of what we deliver as a council within the budget restrictions we have. The EV strategy from OZEV, the Office of Zero Emissions, which is a central government body, is due out at the end of the year, and I'm really hoping that we're going to start to see some proper joined up modal shifts with answers that they're going to provide in their direction of travel.
Brilliant, thank you, Vikki. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of policy, getting this right is going to be fundamental. And it isn't just transport policy, it is local planning. It's going to be building regs, right down, someone's talking about cable gullies, all the little bits of infrastructure need to be built into things like street design. And I think it is critical to recognise that we have the local transport and connectivity plan about to go out for consultation. There is some great vision in there and some great expectation. I'm slightly worried about some of the more fantastical stuff, like encouraging electrical vertical takeoff and landing taxis at Oxford Airport. I mean, God knows what that is doing in a transport policy that's trying to take us to zero carbon. I hope the county is really going to, you know, show us how it turns this vision into reality.
Thanks for that comment, Chris. Yeah, just actually off the back of that, there's, you know, a few comments in the chat about, you know, we sort of don't need everyone to transition to an EV. We actually need fewer cars in general. What's the panel's views on sort of that whole portfolio of different, you know, active transport, public transport, EV charging? Where should the emphasis be placed and where should resources be put in? Chris, you or Paul?
Well, I mean, there isn't one answer to that. That's the problem. You know, active travel is very important. Public transport is very important. But unfortunately, the private car is also going to remain with us for some time yet. It is very important that we start encouraging people out of cars and into alternatives, or using alternatives when they don't need to use a private car. But we've got to take into account the fact that transport mobility is a very varied requirement and different people do it in different ways. That said, we've got to start encouraging the right behaviours and moving people out of just almost by default going, oh, I'll take the car, and I've seen several comments. Yeah, we can't just go and replace every car on the road now with an EV and see the numbers increase further. And I have to say that is one of the dangers with EVs, because people lose sight of the fact that whilst they're more expensive now, when battery cost comes down, there's every opportunity that the private car will actually become cheaper in real terms than we see it now. So we've got to be very careful about this and not just go headlong towards EV as the only solution. We've got to work on all of the solutions. And I have colleagues right across the council working on all of those sorts of things, and we're all we need to do it in a much more joined up mobility mode that makes it easier for people to move out of the private car.
Yep. Chris, did you have something in response?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we are still slightly, one of the problems, the way how this discussion is framed is still in terms of mobility rather than access to the goods and services people need. I mean, it's good to see the county's transport plan talking about 20-minute neighbourhoods so that people have got the services they need without having to get in a car because they can walk or cycle easily. I think we need a lot more really going back to how do we plan the future of this county? How do we integrate the national policy? Well, how do we push for better national policy? But really, let's focus on how we make sure people can get to the doctor's surgery, the school, the library, the shops, all the other things, without feeling they need to get a car. You know, it's give us people access. I mean, it's good that it's actually a local transport and connectivity plan. I think what's going to happen over the next 20 years about where people work from is also something we need to plan into this. There's a whole bunch of innovation, and it's at the moment it's quite hard to pick winners. We're talking about electricity. There's a seminar going on next week about hydrogen, which could have a lot of the same issues. Yeah, we need to really think about modal shift, and active transport will be absolutely critical to that, and we need to get it right. And at the moment, I'm not sure if we are. And we also, as people keep pointing out, in the active transport in rural areas, e-bike routes and so on need to be in there right from the start.
Great, thank you, Chris. And yeah, really interesting to talk about sort of access and connectivity. Yes, and I've just seen actually Daniel Scharf in the comments has talked about the 20-minute neighborhood concept, which I would encourage anyone to have a look at, because that's a really interesting idea that everything can be within sort of 20 minutes of you accessing it without having to sort of get in your car to get there. So really good point on that. Great. So just to sort of come back to EVs again, I'm just going to ask the panel, what have you found the biggest barriers to EV take-up have been in Oxfordshire so far?
Well, just leap in. A, cost. B, fear of the unknown. C, a lot of the kind of the classic EV myths that you're all going to run out on a country road. All of these are technical problems, but some of them, and I think we should recognize that the EV second-hand market is shooting up. A colleague of mine just bought a Nissan Leaf for 6,000. People are going to be buying these. It's not brand new cars, it's not leasing. So that one can be, the cost thing is coming down faster, I think, than people expected. But really, it is people's attitudes. We have to get the people on side to see this as an opportunity.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Vikki, did you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, this is from my learning within the council, but it's a bit more of my personal opinion. And I think that the whole discussions around range anxiety and trying to sort of push the petrol model onto EVs is a real red herring. And don't get me wrong, that people do have issues where they run out of juice because they can't access the infrastructure in the way that they wish to. But we should think a lot more about battery efficiency and the power per watt of your battery rather than the size of your battery. It cannot be sustainable that we are wandering around with these massive range vehicles with these huge batteries in them when 97% of the time, correct me if I'm wrong on this statistic, but 97% of the time your car is parked up in your driveway, and hybrid working is going to feed into that as well. So I really feel that somehow we have a responsibility as public sector organisations, but to try and change some of the dialogue that's very, very strong from some of the more traditional sectors, shall I say, that let's move away from range anxiety and think more about efficiency and how it's not a sin to have a car, an EV, but think about, rather than that second EV, how else you can adapt with the transport hierarchy. So try and nudge people slowly in that direction, but try and make sure they've got access to more than just that one thing around sort of range, and because it's a real barrier for people taking up. And I think someone put in the chat that some people are going back to traditional cars because they're just finding it so stressful. So we need to combat that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vikki. And Phil?
Yeah, I think one of the specific challenges, I mean, I started my journey into EVs about 4 years ago. And one of the challenges I had when I started was actually first finding a charger. That was a challenge. But secondly, finding a charger that worked. There was an email I think came out from one of the leading charge point providers from the managing director saying he was apologising for the poor service on his chargers and the fact that his chargers didn't work. And you know, I think that's diabolical. It's when you get to a charge point, it's essential that it works. It's vital, because you might only have 10 miles left in your car, but you've got a 20-mile journey. What are you going to do if it doesn't work? You're totally isolated. And I think this is a fear that people have had. And this is why we've developed the Park and Charge project, and why specifically we've developed our own charger and made it exceptionally reliable. And we, you know, our whole vision is to make charging easy and reliable. And that's the key thing. And I think if we do that and we achieve that, and to be honest, we're proving that already with our one pilot site, that's going to actually make a big impact to people who don't have the ability to charge at home. They need a reliable alternative, and that's essential. And that's what Park and Charge is all about, is giving people a good alternative, a reliable and a nice, friendly charging experience that they can trust. I think once you've got that, that's one of the hurdles that people will then say, okay, perhaps an EV is the right way to go.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. Sorry, yes, Vikki.
Sorry, just one quick point to that, and I think Phil's made some really good points there. One thing that also I think that is worth mentioning in this space is the applications that are available to enable people to share chargers. So those that have off-street chargers that they can use and rent out to other people for a small fee in a very safe and secure way. These sort of steps towards our nirvana of everyone able to charge easily whenever they need to. These sorts of services, and there's another one doing a trial in Oxford next year, the Charge Ferry, which comes in the middle of the night to charge your car. They're not solutions in their own right, but they are solutions that are going to help us while we transition to more reliable chargers and more ubiquitous charging.
Great, thank you. And Paul?
I was going to build upon what Phil was saying as well. I mean, when we did the original thinking and scoping for what became Park and Charge, reliability was a very key part of what we're looking at. And indeed, if you look at the Oxfordshire EV infrastructure strategy, service standards is a big part of that, because we want to see reliable charging. But the other part of that was we also wanted to make sure people, even if a charger went wrong, weren't going to be left high and dry. So all the car parks that we're doing as part of Oxfordshire Park and Charge have got typically 5 or 6 double-headed chargers. So that means people, when they go in, there is actually a bank of these things. There isn't just this solitary charger stuck in the car park that if it goes down, you're stuffed. You know, there are more than one there. Coming back to the other part of the question you asked, and again, it works with what Vikki said. You know, people lose sight of the fact that the average mileage that a person does, according to DFT, is 36 miles a week. You know, I don't think there's an EV on the road that can't do that, even the old ones. You know, so we've also got to get the size of battery and the journeys that we're doing for the vehicle better aligned, because, you know, we don't need massive batteries that we're seeing. Smaller batteries will work for many people. You know, it needs that sort of thought. And I think the challenge we are going to see, and we're beginning to see now, is yes, you know, people are still concerned about the availability of charging, but now we're getting to the stage where that's beginning to dissipate. And the bigger challenge is actually getting your hands on an EV to start with. You know, the car manufacturers can't make them quick enough now. It takes time to turn over our whole ecosystem to a new technology, and the car manufacturers are working as quickly as they can, but they just cannot meet up with demand. You know, they've got loads of petrol and diesel vehicles that they can't sell. If you look at registration numbers, they are woeful for new cars now, in all but one sector, which is electric vehicles, where they just can't keep up. And you know, the more EVs that are sold into the new market leads to more EVs available for the second-hand market. So as that goes, we will see the second-hand market grow and grow and grow. And you know, the whole ecosystem of car buying will be fed by EV, but it will just take some time.
Josh, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things with EVs is it is in some ways, because it is innovative and new, it's breaking down barriers just by bringing them through, and you've seen that in some of the kind of models. So we worked with an organisation called Co-Cars down in Exeter, and they run an electric vehicle and electric bike hire schemes. And their point, it speaks very much to that point of why buy a car that's going to sit on your driveway for 98% of the time. Instead, why not have a model whereby you can rent that vehicle when you use it? And I think the key point in that is that actually reduces usage as well, because if you have a price per usage rather than a fixed price and you've always got it, then you're going to make a decision sometimes to say, okay, actually, can I avoid that one-off cost? Can I cycle there? Can I find another way of traveling? And I think that we're moving more towards those types of models.
Brilliant, thanks, Josh. Yeah, really interesting about sustainable behavior changes as well. And actually, Chris, maybe you'll address this when I go to you next. But I was just wondering, Chris, if you could talk about the role of sort of campaign groups like Friends of the Earth Oxford in sort of creating that modal shift and helping people make those sometimes difficult behavior changes.
Well, I think the one thing people don't want at the moment is to be preached at. I think we need to enable this change and show people the positive side of this. We need maybe to set an example. I don't drive a car. I've never driven one, and somehow I have managed to survive. And there are millions of people like me who don't drive for various reasons. But I think we need ongoing input. We need quite a lot of carrots for people to encourage them to use the car less. We need to make life easier. We need to share how these things are being done. But we do need the sticks to really kind of make sure that people, if their behavior is going to have to change, we really have to remind ourselves we're not just doing this because it's an exciting technical innovation, which would probably have happened anyway. We're facing a climate crisis. We have to get fossil fuels out of the system as fast as possible. And for better or worse, electrification of existing vehicles of the vehicle size is part of that. We obviously need the behavior change is maybe less about encouraging people to shift to electric vehicles, a lot less, as Paul says. People everywhere are queuing up to buy them. It's more getting people to recognize that they can walk, they can cycle, and anyone, and the neglected bit in all this is public transport. There are a great many people who can't cycle, a lot of older people who can't walk very far. If we're talking about a fair and equitable system, then electric buses, both minibuses and bigger, or maybe hydrogen, whatever it is, but we need to clean up the public transport fleet as well. And that needs government support. That's probably not a place for, it's a big multi-million thing rather than private finance for charging points. But it's all coming down to money.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of buses, especially that so many in Oxford are now sort of hybrid, maybe Vikki, could you talk about some of the other sort of EV projects that Oxford City Council are involved in?
Yeah, so obviously we've got the Zero Carbon Oxford Partnership, which is a group that exists within Oxford that covers some of the bigger polluters in the city and their aims to reduce their carbon, and commercial businesses, both big and small, to try and get a sort of representative breadth and voice, if you like, across the city about how we're going to crack this nut, because we can't do it on our own. As Chris already said, budgets just do not allow us, but our ability to put different people together and support with policy and initiative from our insight and expertise, we're trying to move into this space. So obviously Oxford Bus Company is part of that, BMW is part of that, just to name but two, and we've got sort of last mile delivery as well for our covered markets. But one bit we haven't just talked about, and I just want to do a really quick plug here, is taxis. We've now got 11 taxis, admittedly in the city, but obviously they do go to the rural places as required. We have 11 electric taxis in the city at the moment, and we have just opened another taxi area for rapid charging. And because the take-up and uptick because of COVID slowed down that adoption of taxis, what we have done is now open those rapid chargers to the public as well for a certain amount of time. To trial, to make sure that we get maximum utilisation. So where they are, of course, they're in great easy parts of the city like Keble Road and Mansell Way. We've got another one coming online in Headington. We've got another one coming on in Old Greyfriars, just the other side of January. So shameless plug, but I think this is really important because it starts to give you an idea that, you know, yes, you can charge your EV, but if you are going to make a choice and take a taxi, which already itself is, you know, you're leaving a car at home or you can fit more people in a taxi, you know, more and more you're going to start to see electric vehicles that are taxis around the city. And just another thing on that side, they are deemed a lot more accessible, and we have a lot of good positive feedback by those that have mobility problems that use taxis, obviously, as often their primary transport of choice. So there are things going on. The frustrating thing for any council is that, you know, we're pedaling hard behind the scenes to try and pull these things together and get them delivered. Unfortunately, you don't often see the output as quickly as we'd like, and you know, we've got targets we have to meet. So, you know, that our foot is firmly jammed to the floor, and I hope that you'll start to see a better deployment and change actually on the streets that you can see sooner rather than later.
Great, thank you, Vikki. And you mentioned sort of I guess the difference between Oxford City being that sort of urban centre where quite a lot is happening, but also the rural problem is a question in people's minds. You know, how do you enable people living in more rural communities access to low carbon and accessible mobility options? Does the panel have a view on that? What does that look like in the future? Phil, would you like to go?
Yeah, sure. No, I think rural is a big issue for us, isn't it? If you're stuck out in a village and you don't have access to charging at home, then yeah, absolutely an issue. And visiting friends, family in rural locations will be an issue. So we're very, very keen to look at how we can offer an extension to the Park and Charge project specifically for rural locations. And it seems to me that village halls would be a perfect opportunity. Village halls often have three-phase electricity. There's car parking in village halls. People can stay there overnight. So they're ideal locations. What we need is some initiatives from ourselves, people like ourselves, people like local authorities and the government to actually pilot some of these and try them out and see if they can actually be self-sustainable. If they're self-sustainable, then I'm sure we'll see them grow. But yeah, I think, you know, we need some initiatives now to come along to help us test and try and innovate and check these kind of things out. So very, very keen to do that. In fact, Paul and I have had many discussions already on how we can start looking at supporting rural locations. So very keen to have a look at that in the future as we roll out the Park and Charge concept. Great,
thank you, Phil. Paul.
Yeah, I was going to build on that again. Part of the thinking there as well is if we can, you know, one of my colleagues nicknamed the possibility of going into rural areas was Pub and Charge, because there was another great place that you could possibly put a small charging hub. But, you know, if we can find those sorts of locations, that also could then lead us on to car share in rural locations, because, you know, you've got the infrastructure there to enable an electric car share system to be installed and other mobility solutions. So that's something we're exploring. But more generally, I mean, the whole challenge of providing access to charging for people who don't have off-road parking, you know, everybody talks about that as an issue in cities, but it's true in market towns and villages across Oxfordshire as well. So we're working on a couple of other projects alongside Park and Charge, one of which has been mentioned a couple of times, which is the Gully project, which builds upon something that was trialled in Oxford City about 3-4 years ago now. I think Go Ultra Low Oxford did it. But basically, it's put a gully in a pavement and run the cable between a home charger to the curbside safely in a way that isn't going to cause a hazard to anybody. So Ox Gully, as the project's called, currently we're about to install 30 trials not just in Oxford City, but also in areas of Cherwell District Council, because we believe it's got a huge potential in the rural area as well as city and urban. I mean, I live in Oxfordshire in a village, and I look up and down my road and think, you know, yeah, Ox Gully would work there and there and there. There's another solution that we're looking at as well that also uses your own domestic power and getting it curbside, called Doorstep. It's by Trojan Energy. That's a lot more complicated and a much more costly solution. But I mean, Phil won't like me saying this, the cheapest way you're ever going to have to charge up your EV is using domestic power. Unfortunately, it's a corollary of the fact that, you know, the costs that a commercial provider have in actually providing the energy is far higher than what you and I pay for our domestic energy. So, you know, we need to access as much of that as we can as well. There is not one solution to all of this, so we need to be able to enable multiple opportunities, multiple solutions, and let people use the best one that works for them.
Well, thanks, Paul. Chris, did you have something you'd like to say?
Well, just as a parish councillor, albeit right on the edge of Oxford, I think the point about village halls and places where there are car parks in small villages is something that needs some careful thought. I mean, we heard about pubs. Are there sports clubs? Saroj has mentioned faith-based organisations, again, with car parks. We should remember that we won't be having this kind of discussion in 5-10 years' time, because this will all have happened. But as Paul has said, if all that's happened is that we have changed from petrol to electricity at a point when our grid is also decarbonising, we're going to have an awful lot less air pollution, which is a major plus, but we will still have huge unnecessary road congestion. So I think let's keep focusing on the charging for now, but let's not get diverted from saying we need a sustainable and equitable transport system, and that the private car is near the bottom of the hierarchy. Active transport, public transport, encouraging people to make the journeys they don't need to make by cars. You know, radio journalist, I won't mention her name, told me recently that he was really worried about the zero emission zone because it would mean that he couldn't pop down into Oxford from Summertown in his car to do a bit of shopping. I mean, there, if you like, is a mindset. There are buses, every 3 minutes from down the Banbury Road, pretty much. But he wanted to get in his car. How do we tackle that inbuilt attitude?
Yeah, that's a great question. If anyone else on the panel would like to respond to that challenge, that would be interesting.
I can't challenge, but I would agree with Chris. An area of work my team would really love to do is all about the mindset, the how do we nudge people better into different ways of doing things. The problem is it's very difficult to get the funding to go and do that sort of work. Everybody focuses on the technologies. They don't actually zero in on the human factors involved in that. And it's a constant struggle, a constant something that I really would love to really get to grips with. And I know that there's other people out there who would love to get to grips with this as well, because it is one of those issues we really need to understand. And part of why we're involved in projects like Park and Charge is so we can understand what happens when you offer these sorts of things to people, and we can take account of that in terms of future policy and future ideas.
Great, thanks, Paul. I know that there's actually quite a few people on the call who are from sort of various community action groups, and I know that a lot of those people focus on trying to encourage the communities around them to take those sort of behavioural lifestyle change choices. So might be interesting to connect with the CAG network, if you like, the Community Action Group network, on those kind of sort of more psychological or societal issues, as you mentioned. Phil, question for you in the chat from Councillor John Broad is around whether you can integrate vehicle to grid technology with the Park and Charge project. What's your view on this?
Well, it's the problem we've got with vehicle to grid is the technology is not actually ratified yet. And also the major issue with vehicle to grid is the actual physical connection. So at the moment, there's only actually 2 vehicles in the UK that can do vehicle to grid, and the connection that they use is called a CHAdeMO socket. So you'd have to enable the chargers to do vehicle to grid is one thing, but also you'd have to have different connectors. So I think, yeah, vehicle to grid is great technology and it offers all sorts of wonderful aspects that we can do. I think the most benefit will come at home. On vehicle to grid, I think that's where the major benefits will come, but the benefits won't come until all the OEMs are aligned and they've all got the right connector, they've all decided on the connector, they've all decided on how we're going to do it, and also the electricity companies are also aligned. And I think there's a bit of work to do before actual vehicle to grid will start seeing it proliferate. I think we'll see a lot of innovation, we'll see lots of studies and we'll see lots of trials, but I don't think we're there yet on vehicle to grid in terms of the standards and the technology. The technology's there. It's more about the standards and it's more about the OEMs adopting the standards and working together. And that's a bit of a challenge, I think. We'll get there, but it will be a while, I think. I don't think we'll be seeing massive vehicle to grid uptake before probably 2025 is my estimate, when it'll start to come through.
Thanks for your insight, Phil. That's really interesting. And I know, yeah, Dave Beasley on the call, he has trialed V2G with his own office fleet, I think, which has been really interesting, and anyone should go check that out if they're interested. Just in the interest of time, we'll probably come on to our last question. I'm aware that there have been so many questions in the chat, and thank you so much for all of your engagement, and thanks also to the panelists for sort of having a look and responding. We will be sort of getting a saved version of this chat and sort of going through it, and if there are any outstanding questions that are really burning, we'll attempt to address those perhaps in our follow-up email to all attendees. So fear not, the conversation will carry on. But just as sort of a final question, and you know, Phil and Josh and others on this panel will know about this, but Easy Charge are currently raising money from local Oxfordshire people by issuing a bond through people-powered finance provider Ethics, who are represented here by Josh today. Do the panel see this model for financing sustainable? Do the panel see this as a model for financing sustainable transport solutions across the county? So sort of leaning on people power.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful solution, isn't it? But the main thing with these chargers is they're not cheap. You know, a commercial charger to put in a car park's got to be chunky, it's got to be reliable, it's got to last 25 years. So it's a big, expensive piece of kit. Not like a home charger, which is hundreds of pounds. These things are thousands of pounds. And the installation, you know, you've got to dig up a car park, you've got to put concrete in the ground, you've got to build a cabinet to distribute the electricity, and you've got to connect into the DNO. This is an expensive capital infrastructure project. And the only way we can fund it is with large investment. And that's why we reached out to Ethics. And we've been really successful so far in raising that funding from all the individuals around Oxfordshire. We've got over 144 investors now, you know, and it's ranging from very small amounts, you know, a few £100 up to several tens of thousands. So it's a fantastic way for individuals to get involved, to help, to make things happen. You know, how would this have happened years ago? You'd rely on the government, wouldn't you? And you'd be waiting for a long time to rely on the government to do this kind of massive investment in infrastructure. And here we are, where we can all club together we can all help out, we can all put our little bit in and get a return, which is far better than you get in the bank. So it's a wonderful way of doing these projects. And I see it personally for this business as the way to grow the business. And, you know, we're already looking at doing park and charge Northampton, park and charge in some of the London boroughs, park and charge Northeast. We're already talking to people about that, and hopefully be using the platform again to build on our knowledge and our expertise of what we've done for Oxfordshire.
Real thanks, Phil. And Josh.
Thanks for that, Phil. Yeah, I mean, I would just like to say it's just, we see ourselves as part of the kind of ecosystem to enable that, you know, these high impact environmental, in delivering, you know, high impact environmental change throughout the county, but throughout the UK as well. You know, we've worked on projects from all the way from down in Cornwall to all the way up in north of Scotland. We've worked with a lot of community energy organisations and helped them to, you know, be able to generate electricity that stays within that community, that the revenues generated from that go into community funds, which fund then, you know, fuel poverty programs in the local area. So we see it as a, you know, really important kind of revolutionary thing in a way, because if you can get people to shift the way they use their money, then that has a really fundamental impact, actually. And it's, you know, of course, people should look at things like their pensions and where even who they bank with, but also if they are in a position where they can invest, they should also be able to, you know, invest into high impact organisations like Easy Charge, and that's our vision, and that's what we would like to see more of, basically.
Great, thank you, Josh. And Chris.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting question here. I've invested in various community energy projects. Oxfordshire's only wind farm, Westmill, was started with private money. But we don't invite people to invest in roads or sewers or electric or the pilot national grid. Those are seen as national infrastructure. Is there a point where this kind of charging system in 10 years' time will be seen like broadband? I don't know. But I think we need to think quite carefully about this. The other model I think that might be explored is the Islington model, where the borough is inviting local people to invest in local projects. So that can be done on another scale. I appreciate that may be one of FX's rivals. But I think getting people to put their money where their mouth is, if they've got money to spare, is really important. But we should also think about this as part of that national infrastructure programme.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. Any sort of last comments? Yes, Vikki.
Just a really quick one. I think that where this type of investment is going to be absolutely key is around some more of the community-based energy solutions. I think distributed energy is going to be a key part of our infrastructure going forward, and to give people the autonomy and safeguard energy in their area to enable both zero carbon, but also to facilitate their transition to that is going to be fundamental. And I think it's something that, you know, whether it's a solar farm or battery store, small community battery stores and such, I think these are going to become a commonplace in not that too distant future.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vikki. And Paul, did you have any sort of last comments? That's all right.
I mean, we're seeing this more and more where local people are banding together to help fund the solutions. And, you know, I think we've got to be innovative about how we fund things going into the future, as well as being innovative about what the solutions are. So, you know, I think the two work hand in hand.
I think that's a great statement as well. Just thinking about, you know, we're creating a new future that looks very different. Perhaps our finances also need to look very different as well. And that sort of sense of empowerment that people get as well from knowing that they've actively contributed to a great project that will reduce carbon and enable access for lots more people is really important. So thank you for mentioning that. We're now at the end of our time. We're actually 3 minutes over, so I do apologize for that, but the conversation was just so good that I thought I would just let it carry on a bit longer. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended this webinar for putting in your questions. Apologies if we didn't get round to answering all of them. I think there's probably over 60 comments in the chat or something like that, which just shows how valuable this conversation is and how much the topic of transport needs to be talked about and needs to be addressed. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you to brilliant panelists, to Josh, Paul, Phil, Chris and Vikki. Thanks so much for spending time with us today and for sharing your insights. Really great stuff. And we'll be sending a follow-up email to all attendees so that you can have a recording of this webinar, as well as some other bits and pieces of information that were shared today. So yes, thank you once again and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks,
Take
guys.
care.
Take care.